Good morning to you. It is Tuesday, the 18th of February, and we have come gathered to listen to a presentation on the book of Hebrews. We are in chapter 6, and I trust you are well. Theo is not with us, but we are going to continue in the unfolding story of what stick-to-itiveness looks like. 13 chapters, 303 verses track that idea for us. Stagnation is an interesting phenomenon, to say the least, because it is a prolonged period of little to no growth in an economy. And what goes paired with that, or along with that, is high unemployment. And it can happen at a macro level, a macro scale, a micro scale, as well as a meso scale. And things are slow, or everything is flat. Growth is flat. And when the market booms, the stock market booms or increases, it is interesting how that, jobs become available. Recession slows. But stagnation can happen in cycles, economic cycles, or even business cycles. And in order to overcome stagnation, governments resort to a number of different methodologies. When there's an increase in government spending, they try to offset stagnation. Wages increase, additional money flows in, and goods and services increase. So government increases spending in order to offset stagnation. The decreasing of taxes and regulation is another one, or the lowering of interest rates. And in this arena, you not only have stagnation, but what has commonly come to be called stagflation. We had a great recession from 2008 to about 2020. That was when COVID hit. The gross national product is deeply affected when stagnation sets in. And so countries often try to offset these indicators or these stagnant performance indicators in different ways. So they go to the bottom lines. What are the bottom lines, and what do we need to do to offset stagnation? Well, we are in a section of the biblical text in Hebrews chapter 6, where we are going to be looking at this particular phenomenon. It is a terrible thing to stagnate. How do we prevent stagnation? That's what verse 1 of chapter 6 to verse 12 is going to talk about. But it comes out of a section where the writer is talking about the importance of moving on. Move on, don't stop. Train your senses. Get out of the cot or the cradle and start moving toward wisdom's gym. Start to train your senses. Start to exercise your soul. Start to exercise the disposition of your soul toward godliness. And when he talks about the senses, he's talking about things like our minds. Strengthen our minds, strengthen our thinking capacity, strengthen your will, and calibrate your emotions. I would love to do a whole series on that, the importance of calibrating your emotions, because in the West, we just kind of cancel this one out. We negate it and sort of put it in a little corner as if it does not play into our thought processes and how we engage with reality. how we embrace reality. Well, the book of Hebrews is written to Christian Hebrews. And there are 5 encouragements, 5 bastions of encouragement, which have traditionally been called warning passages. Well, the word warning only appears once in chapter 13, and it's around about verse number 22. The writer says, I've written to you briefly, very briefly. Wow, 303 verses are unpacked in this story about what stick to itiveness looks like. But 5 encouragement passages. The first one comes up in chapter 2, then chapter 3, then 5, then 10, and then 12. So 5 times across the book, there are these intense exhortations, these intense encouragements, what we would commonly call admonitions. And interspersed, you have these expositions, these teaching blocks. And so we see the importance, we're going to see the importance of moving on. Don't reach for the chair. Don't say, I'm going to clock out for a short while because things are just about too hot. Because that was what these Christian Hebrews were doing. Things had been getting so challenging, and they were now considering going back to Judaism, going back to the old way, because it's convenient. There's no chutzpah required to do that. Just slip into oblivion, slide home. Well, the writer says it's only through constant practice that we are able to differentiate and distinguish good from evil. What's the good? Pressing on, holding fast. And another way of saying that would be continue to believe, keep believing, continue to trust, continue to make a concerted effort to grow your faith. Only believe, only believe. All things are possible. Only believe, because allegiance to the cross is what this is all about. And when you swear allegiance to the cross, the day you trust Christ as Lord and Savior, you need to continue believing, because salvation is not tied to works, neither before saving faith, as we would say, nor after trusting Christ as Lord and Savior. No works can make him love us more. No works can make him love us less. It's all about trusting. And now in verse number 1 of chapter 6, the writer is going to start to unpack in very careful fashion how that though these Christian believers, these Christian Hebrews, have been named and shamed, they are stick to the certainty that hope brings. So in this third encouragement, rather than risking stagnation's results, they are to stick with their responsibility to transform and be rewarded. You see, it's all about transformation and change. Why was the scriptures given? Not primarily to sharpen my mental machinery, even though that's part of it. The end game is transformation. Christ-likeness, that's another way to put it. And we are to take responsibility to transform, because that increases meaning and meaningfulness. We did a series on this channel entitled Mindfulness. When I pay attention and I become mindful to what is happening in my life and what God is doing, I can become strategically intentional with taking up the responsibility to transform. So, though refusal to take responsibility for transformation, though it carries dire consequences, this morning you're going to see that these can be averted by maturing. That comes up in verse 1 to verse 12. So we're going to spend extended time in this paragraph of the unfolding story. So, in the time that is left, let me hit one idea, only one. There are three major ideas that you can track through the 12 verses. And I would give them to you in three distinct words. The first one is ideology, followed by imagery, followed by consistency. Ideology, imagery, consistency. We're going to look at how that ideology captivates us by restricting the possibility for transformation, restricting the possibility for mind change. That's in the first 6 verses. And then the writer moves to using imagery, because you see, images and pictures is what illustrates, it explains. Imagery illustrates by revealing the reality of either productivity or catastrophe, for pressing on or bailing out, respectively. He uses pictures to show the reality of either going and being productive or destroying our lives and ruining it in light of pressing on or bailing out. Because pressing on brings productivity, and bailing out would bring catastrophe. So very hefty ideas here. And then in verse 9 to verse 12, he's going to show that consistency ameliorates by choosing better responses that God takes note of. Consistency as a way of making things better, by making things change. Consistency ameliorates by choosing better responses that God takes note of. So it's ideology, imagery, consistency. Let's look at ideology, because an ideology is an idolatry of ideas, where we set up systems of thinking and we hide inside of those systems or paradigms, and it brings us great relief. And the reason we do that is because systems provide high certainty. They allay our uncertainties and our fears. There are 3 occupations that I've thought about over the past number of days that have high uncertainty tied to them. You may say every occupation has uncertainty tied to it, and that probably is true. But if you are in the military and you're on the front line, high danger that you will die or could die. You live with high uncertainty. Will I come home? And then there's the Navy, the same. I could die at sea. High uncertainty when there's war at sea. And then in the Air Force, high uncertainty in that job. And then I also thought about firefighting. Firefighters' jobs are high risk jobs. And you may say the same for actuarial science or insurances or any fiscal industry, because none of them carry the kind of certainties that we require. Stock market can change. Aid can be cut off. And so we take flight to ideologies, because ideologies is what captivates us. We think it keeps us safe. But systems thinking does that. And that's why, as Bible believers, we are not called to embrace an idolatry of ideas. It's interesting that the first commandment has to do with, you shall have no idols before me. You are not to set up graven images. And we think of those images purely as marble and stone and iron, metal. something that we create with our own hands, something that we shape from wood. Well, we can just as well shape mental idols in our own minds because we get captivated by isms. And an ism captivates. So we try everything and make every effort on this channel not to be captivated by isms. And that's why we need to be interacting with each other around the scriptures, because we are able to see iron sharpening iron. And so when we get together for the next exciting episode tomorrow, we're going to start to track through these verses. And I'm not going to go verse by verse, but I'm going to look at the paragraph of the unfolding story in terms of its broad strokes, because that is what really helps us to understand the details. Is this sort of sacred cow of unleashing the power of the scriptures verse by verse. There's a place for that. But you cannot unleash power verse by verse if you don't keep the broad scope in view. With limited analysis and constantly keeping the landscape of the text, all 13 chapters, all 303 verses before your gaze. So it's not an either or, it's a both and, but constantly keeping the big picture. It's stick-to-itiveness that is in view. And so we're going to continue this talk tomorrow. And so I trust that you've been encouraged as you've been listening on this channel. And we trust that you would enjoy the day as you go with God. Thank you for listening.